asked somebody about the pizza. They said it wasn't New York pizza, but I'm still going to get a slice before I leave here. But you guys are in teaching, and so I'm all about being a student. So I'm probably going to learn more from you in this conversation than not. I just want to talk for a few minutes and then maybe take some questions. I know we have about 15 or 20 minutes, but when I do get the opportunity to speak in front of children, or I get the opportunity to, I do some lecturing at New York University, and I also speak at Columbia, and because I'm involved with NIFTY, the National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship, I get a chance sometimes to go on some of their junkets and so forth. And so the principal thing that I talk about to the kids, and these are the kids that I guess you guys are talking to, is like the bid ask of, age 15 to 18, 15 to 17, that zip code. It's an interesting group of people. Now, some of us remember what we were like when we were 15, 16, 17. Some of us forget. I sort of remember it. It was an awkward time for me. I wanted to be cool. It was a desperation to be cool. And so I was underachieving in school. And by the time I got to be 18, I was, I had a gold chain, I had the black T-shirt, I had the red Camaro, okay, and I had the power booster in the car, and I was driving around like a big dummy. And so I like telling people that because, I was underachieving in school, I was doing all the wrong things in an effort to be cool, in an effort to fit in. And I was also in a high school where the culture of the high school was, if you were smart, or you were doing well in school, well, you know what, that was a really bad social status thing because that meant that you weren't cool, you were a geek. And so I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad was a laborer, he never went to college. My mom was a homemaker. And it was middle class, it was great middle class, American classic experience. I was fighting with my brother in a little small room. We had enough food, we had enough air conditioning, we had enough heat. I would never demean my dad by over-exaggerating the extent of my origins. It was really a nice place to grow up. But it was a blue-collar place. And so sometimes what happens is when you're in a blue-collar area, you have this de-emphasization, or it's not even a word, so it's just George Bush to you guys. Okay, let me just come up with another word. But, you're de-emphasizing education, you're de-emphasizing academics. And so one of the things I always say to these kids is, you've got to step over that. You've got to force yourself out of your comfort zone as it relates to your peers, and you've got to break out of that and try to start, as a youth entrepreneur, a movement, a cultural movement in your school of success and achievement and academic standing. So all of a sudden the cool factor goes into the school and the school work as opposed to who you're hanging out with or who you're socializing with on a Saturday night. And so that's usually the message I try to give to people because, learning from my own experience. Now, I got very lucky because I had very high test scores. I was also a halfway decent athlete back then. And so I got into a small college called Tufts University. And when the tuition bill came, it was $24,000 for that year. And my dad was probably making, I think, $35,000 or $36,000 back in 1982, and we could not afford to go to that school. Now, it's a different world today. I think there's more economic pressure on the middle and lower classes than ever before. But the opportunity there in 1982, when I went to college, was I could take out student loans. I remember one of the nicest things my dad did for me was that he cashed in his life insurance. I still remember this. He gave me $10,000 from a cash surrender value of, I think it was something he got from his union. He gave it to me, and I put it towards school. And the light bulb went off in my head. I was like, oh my God, this is $24,000 a year, okay, and it's after-tax dollars. And I got to really take this thing seriously. If I don't take this thing seriously, I'm going to let down my folks, and I don't want to do that. They've worked very hard for this money. So I always try to bring this story back to the relatability in the family and sort of the pride that you hope to have for your family to do better. And so I took his money, I borrowed money, I went to work, and I did, actually, I don't want to come across, but anyway, I did very well in college, well enough where I got myself into Harvard Law School. So now that I'm at Harvard Law School, there's more money. I think that was like $26,000 a year. So I did the same thing again. So now, when I walked out of those two educational things, I was, I don't know, maybe $130,000 in debt. I used to tell people I was like a walking junk bond. You know, I had no money. I can remember, you know, like, you know, the credit card, you know, convenience checks. I was paying, using them to pay things, trying to buy clothing to go to work. And then I took the wrong job. So now I come out of Harvard Law School. I tell the kids always, you know, I wanted that really cool job. I didn't want the job that I was going to be good at. That wasn't cool enough. So I was still stuck in that mindset. So I wanted to go to that cocktail party at the end of Harvard Law School. It was a really famous cocktail party. You go there, you know, President Obama's been to that party. He went to Harvard Law School. Governor Romney has gone to that party. You know, I know because it's a very famous party. You go to the party, and what do? You tell your buddies where you're going to work. That's really cool. And so for me, it was real estate was really cool, and investment banking was cooler. So I went to go work for Goldman Sachs in the real estate investment banking division. That was double cool. The problem was I was like absolutely terrible at that job. Terrible. So guess what happened to me? I did a really bad job. No matter how hard I was working, no matter how hard I was trying, got myself in the wrong job. We went into a recession. Every entrepreneur has to know that that happens. We're in a cyclical economy. We went into a recession, lost my job. Very painful time for me because I'm walking junk bond, all this debt, lost my job, had to refocus and retool myself. And then this is where I get into the segue with the kids about relationships, because you see, I had a very good relationship with my boss, and so he recommended me for another job at Goldman. This is sort of a funny part of the story, which I sometimes tell. It's embarrassing too, but I'll tell it anyway. So I'm being fired. My old boss, he says, okay, here's an $11,000 severance check. You know, you're done. Okay. It's horrified. There was no cell phones, no internet, no nothing back then. I had a bunch of quarters. I went back to New York City, was putting quarters into payphones. And somebody mentioned that there was a job at Goldman Sachs in the sales area. I'm a little bit better at that than I was investment banking. I went to go interview for that. My old boss recommended me because he liked me. Relationships, getting along with people. So they rehired me. I got fired in February. I got rehired at the end of March. Personnel department calls me. They're like, hey, we got really good news for you. You don't ever have to tell anybody you're fired. You don't have to go to Wichita, Kansas and tell anybody you were fired. We're going to mark you down as an interdepartmental transfer. I said, oh, this is great. Let me give you the bad news. Can we get the $11,000 check back? Now, of course they couldn't, because I was putting it into the junk bond repayment program, you know? So I'd already spent the money. And that woman was really cool. She marked me down as interdepartmental transfer. So I didn't have to tell this story. I could have hid it from everybody, but I think it's an important story to tell because it's about failing upwards. You know, you're showing up for the game. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to win and lose. But you got to build the right relationships. Okay, so I have children. I have a 20-year-old son. I have a 17-year-old daughter. And I've got a 14-year-old boy. Now, if you have children in the room, you know, believe in God, which I happen to believe in God. I'm still one of the Americans that does. But if you believe in God, you're like, okay, how did I get these people? Where do they come from? And boy, they're all so different, right? My oldest son is like super serious. I always picture him like marrying a cellist, where they'll be like sipping tea. He'll have his pinky up like this. Okay? I don't know where that came from. He's a baritone opera singer. He was nationally ranked in his high school. I mean, growing up in my neighborhood, there were no baritone opera singers. I don't know where he came from. Okay? My daughter, I think she's, Hugo Chavez just died, but that's not the right country for her. She's waiting for the Castro brothers to die. Then she's going to move down there and take over the country. Okay, she's like a little dictator. She's like a really strong person. And if you see Les Miserables, she actually has a role in the movie. She auditioned for the movie, and she plays alongside of Anne Hathaway as she was 16 at the time. She's 17 now, and she's a great little singer. And then my son, I told Mitt Romney, because I worked on his campaign, I said, my son, Governor Romney, he's the true Mormon. He wants to marry the Dallas Cowboy cheerleading squad and move him to Utah and live in a bigamy camp. I'm absolutely convinced of that. That's my son, So they're totally different people, and I can only give them one gift. You see, if I give them money, that's great. We all know the cliche. You can give somebody fish, but you got to really teach them to fish because that's where the empowerment comes from. So it won't be money will be the gift that I give them. I hope the gift that I can give them is to celebrate the successes of their friends. See, this is the #1 thing to tell somebody that's trading in that zip code of age 15 to age 18. Because this is one of the most vulnerable periods in their life as they're gaining independence from their parents. It's an interesting thing. There's an arbitrage happening. They're gaining independence and separation from their parents, but conversely, they want to belong to the group. They don't want to be independent from their friends. They want to be at that party. They want to be known as the person that's the cool person. So there's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of internal struggle related to that. We all read Lord of the Flies. Some of us recognize some of the people in Lord of the Flies. We know that we're trapped inside a 100,000-year-old piece of machinery. This thing that we're living in hasn't evolved for 100,000 years. We've got primordial emotion. We've got a certain gene pool. We've got a certain way that we act. Some of it is based on our emotions and our hormones, and then some of it is that special part of us that makes us human, where we can step out of the jealousies, we can step out of the envies, we can step out of the pettiness and become human. And when we get to the sublime part of our humanity, it's when we're actually looking at our friends and celebrating their successes. So I'll tell you this quick story. Here's my daughter who's in Les Miserables. But when she was 9 years old, she tried out at the local community center to be Dorothy, or the Wizard of Oz. And she didn't get it. She became the coroner. We've all seen the movie. You know, the little guy, he pulls out the certificate of death. You know, you absolutely and positively dead, you know, the singer. So she didn't get it. So she comes home. You know, I hate Karen Smith, we'll call her. You hate Karen Smith? Like, just like your best friend. She hangs out at that. Oh, she got Dorothy. I don't know how she got Dorothy. I hate her. You know, my other friends hate her too. And I needed to get Dorothy. I said, okay, yeah, let me say you can. That's one way to handle this, okay? You can handle it that way. The other way is you can pick up the phone right now, call your friend, and say, hey, you know what? Congratulations. That was a wonderful audition. Really happy for you. You must be super excited that you got Dorothy. See the transition? One is a primordial, atavistic emotion, and the other one is more human. That's the one that we need to make our society better, right? The one where we celebrate each other's success. And so now my daughter, grudgingly, because she's Fidel Castro, I mean, she really is strong, she picks up the phone, she says congratulations, and that next night they have a sleepover. And guess what? Her friend shares with her some vulnerability and says, you know, I've been really upset. Nobody but you called me. You must be my best friend. Nobody but you called me. You see that? It's a very human story, but it's an entrepreneurial story because it's about relationships and about building relationships. Okay, now, we are individuals, and every one of us in this room, because we're sitting here and we want to teach entrepreneurship, be entrepreneurs, we want to praise, uplift, and create the individual in each of us. We want to make sure that there's a form of expression for all of us to have. But yet, when you step back and you really look at life, it is a social contract, right? Social contract in terms of how we live together and what our civics are. But there's also a social contract as it relates to organizational structure and what works to really become an entrepreneur, or a good sportsman, or sportswoman, a good team player. What is that? Okay, that's the ability to subordinate the self for the betterment of the organization, or for the betterment of the group. So I always tell these kids, you know, there's no I in the word team. You've all heard that. But Michael Jordan said there's I in the word win. See, that is no I in the word team. So you have to fuse the individual with the team. So you got to work super hard to grow yourself and be the best person that you could be. For me, it wasn't being a good investment banker. I had to find a different role for myself. And you know, you got to accept failure if you're going to be an entrepreneur, so you have to find that role for yourself. But then the second thing is, once you got that role, how do you fit into that team? And the number one thing you need to do is you have to subordinate yourself to those people on that team. Now, you probably don't follow American sports, so this will go over, New York sports. This will go over some people's heads, but I'll describe the personalities to you. There are two players on the New York Yankees, and I know I'm being taped. Try to make me look taller if you can, if you don't mind.
Real close.
Yeah, look at the angle. I've always tried to solve for that. I haven't been able to do that yet. Okay, but and you know, this is fine that it's being taped, but there's two guys. One guy is A-Rod, that's Alex Rodriguez, and the other guy's Derek Jeter. Now, maybe you know their personalities, maybe you don't, so I'll be brief on it. A-Rod is all about A-Rod. Okay, he's got the wrong pronoun usage for a team. It's I, it's me, it's mine. All about A-Rod. Okay, he's more concerned about his stats, he's more concerned about his personal vanity, who his girlfriend is. He spits sunflower seeds on the floor, and he makes the kids that are working the clubhouse pick up the sunflowers. I know this because I'm close to a lot of these guys on the team. Now there's Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter cares less about his individual statistics. He cares completely about the team. How did Derek Jeter get voted captain of the Yankees? The owners didn't vote him captain, the players did. And how do you get voted captain on a team if you're a bid-ass 15 to 18, you're age 15 to 18? The other people around you have to look at you and say, is this person helping me? Is this person willing to dial themselves back to help me? Is this person willing to help the team? Now, Derek Jeter will catch a foul ball in the stands. A couple of years ago, I watched him go into the stands. He bruised his face. A couple of guys in here are shaking their head. They probably saw the game. It was a Red Sox-Yankee nationally televised game. He went into the stand. Did you see A-Rod anywhere near that ball? Okay, Jeter's a shortstop. Third baseman's a lot closer to that ball. See that? Okay, and that's why he has the respect of his teammates. Okay, so the number one thing that I try to express to young people is the relationships are going to make or break your success. Okay, can you lead? Well, if you lead, you have to work with people. And in some ways, you have to work for them. They don't work for you. You know, I've been running Skybridge for 8 years. I management to $7.3 billion in 8 years during the worst financial crisis. I'm not here to brag about that. That's just what happened. Okay, but there's nobody at Skybridge that works for me. They work with me. And in so many ways, I work for them. In a lot of ways, I'm the trustee or the custodian of a lot of people. If there's 50 people at Skybridge, well, you know what? Maybe there's 600 or 700 people that are relying on the firm. I know my mom and dad are because I help them out. I know my children are. I know my employees have children, and so on and so forth. You see that. I'll really date myself. You remember that shampoo commercial from the 70s? You know, it expands, and there's probably 600 or 700 people that are relying on Skybridge. So I got to do the right thing. I got to think about not myself, but what is the best interest of the firm. I try to relate that to the kids. Very hard to do 15 to 18 because you want to shine, you want to stand out, you want to fit in, you want to do those certain things. But the real individual, the person that can really take claim to that success, and the person that will land softly when there's a failure is the one that can create those relationships. You know, it's a George Bailey moment. We're all going to have it, you know. You didn't see It's a Wonderful Life. He's standing he just got himself married. He's in the bank. There's a run on the bank. Bailey's savings and loan. And he's helping all the people in there. Calm them down. It's good leadership. And he himself got in trouble. His uncle lost some money. The evil guy in the story, you know, took the money. And now the guy's in trouble. And what happened? Everybody in the town bailed him out. Power of relationships. They felt that he was helping them, and then they wanted to return the favor and help him. You'll get that reciprocity. So those are certain messages that I like to talk about with younger people when I'm teaching them. That was helpful. I got time for questions. I got 5 minutes, right?
I have a question.
Yes.
So can you talk about, just slightly, how did relationships that you made help build your $7.1 billion successful organization today? I mean, can can you correlate?
I can give you very specific examples. So I went to college, actually I was at law school when he was at business school, with the current CEO of Citibank, Michael Corbat. He just replaced Vikram Bandit. In 2008, our little firm was really rocked by the financial crisis. We had probably $300 or $400 million under management. And if you ask me honestly at that point, I was very concerned about the survivability of our firm because we were a small firm at a period of time where there was a lot of fear in the marketplace. And so I was looking at the crisis. You guys probably all remember this. There's a Chinese symbol for crisis. One of the parts of the symbol is danger, but the other part of the symbol is opportunity. So those two symbols fused together mean crisis in Chinese. So you have to focus on the opportunity when there's a crisis. You got to keep a cool head. And so I called him. I said, listen, this is what's going on with me. I need help. And he sat me down. He said, well, I got to tell you something. I said, I have this opportunity for you. I can sell you our fund of funds business. We have to shed our assets because we just took in government money to shore up our balance sheet, but we have to pay the government back. And so we're selling our non-core assets. So I had a 20-plus year relationship with him. And so I was able to do that deal more or less on a handshake. Yes, we papered it up, but I had the inside track there because I kept that relationship. I helped him with his career. He helped me with mine. I'll give you another very specific example. When I was 19 years old, the head of the trustees at Tufts was a guy by the name of Nate Gantry. And so Rocky Carzo, isn't that the best name ever for like an athletic director? Rocky Carzo, okay? I was working for him because I had work study, and I was running the intramural program, the basketball program. So he was barking at me. You just picture this guy, all gravelly. He's like, get your suit on, and you got to go up to the administration building. And this guy, Nate Gantry's flying in, and we got to get a $6,000 check from him to keep the lights on for the basketball. So I met Nate Gantry in my 100% polyester suit, and I was really dressed fashionably at that moment. And I met him. He groaned. He says, okay, you're obviously here for money. Rocky's put you up to this. What do you need? And he wrote me a $6,000 check, but I stayed in touch with him. Stayed in touch with him as my career. Fast forward, 19 to 37. I'm running my first company. Started it in 1996. I meet with him. He becomes an investor in the company. He wrote me a check where I managed his money. Started the company in 96. He invested in 97. In 2001, a New York Stock Exchange publicly traded company called Neuberger Berman, which a lot of the guys in the financial industry would know, wants to buy my company. And so I meet with the CEO. He says, listen, we want to buy your company, but we got to get board approval. And so you're going to have to make a presentation to our board, and I'm not making this up, September the 4th, 2001. So that would be the Tuesday before September 11th. So I walk into the boardroom at Neuberger Berman, and there's Nate Gantry. This is the guy that I met in the polyester suit, not but stayed in touch with him, kept my relationship. He says, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm the founder of Oscar Capital. My partner was Bozart. We were really dumb as it relates to marketing. We were going to call it Bosker Capital. Bozart and Scaramucci. Those are two really rough ethnic names. Not going to fly. So we did something really smart. We called it Oscar Capital. We dropped the B. The worst name in financial services history, but whatever. So I said, I'm the SCAR at Oscar Capital. He's like, oh, that's really... And then he told the CEO, he's known me since I was 19. It made it easier to sell that company. And so I'm trying to give you concrete examples of how you keep your relationships, celebrate the successes of your friends, dial back your envy. Listen, it's a human emotion. If you haven't felt envy, you're lying to yourself and you're lying to the people around you. You just are. So you know you felt it. You're in a 100,000-year-old piece of machinery. It's designed, that's how you got here. Okay? That's how your genes got passed on to another generation. So you got to figure out a way to, transverse that. You got to come out of that. And so if you do that, you can create a lot of relationships where many people from all walks of life, all faiths, all colors, doesn't matter. You do enough traveling, you spend enough time with people, you know we're all the same. I know we are, and you sort of know we are too. So people that don't really have the experience of, when I walked onto the Saudi Arabian Airlines flight in London. Traveled to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in 2002, right after 9/11. Walked on a flight, and everybody on that flight had the Arab headdress on. Okay, now I'll confess this to you. My heart was racing. I thought I was on the plane with a group of terrorists. Okay? Now, these guys are laughing over there because they're like, yeah, you probably were, right? Know everything? No, I'm kidding. But what happens is you get profiled. The media biases you towards certain things. And I don't care if you're black. I don't care if you're white. Guess what? You're getting profiled, okay? You know, there are people. Somebody said that, you know, my dad was in the concrete business. I said this afternoon, aren't all Italians? And the whole place laughed out. You know, you're profiled. It doesn't matter who you are. Okay? But they were normal people. There were no terrorists on that plane. It's just their traditional dress. You see what I'm saying? And so you do enough traveling, you recognize that we're all the same. George Herbert Walker Bush was the ambassador to China. There's a great documentary on him called 41. He said when he got to China, Nixon made him the ambassador. He got to China, he's like, okay, it's red China, these people are atheists, they don't care about their families. He went to the park on a Sunday afternoon, and there were 3 and sometimes 4 generations of Chinese together. And he's walking around in the park, he's got his bicycle, he's like, this media bias is a bunch of BS. These people are a lot like us. We have to figure out a way to get along. It's relationships. And it has to, you got to come out of your tribe. Okay, you got to break the bonds of your tribe and embrace the people around you. If you can do that at bid-ask 15 to 18, you can really create an unbelievable business. You can really conceive an amazing business.
I know you
Not
have
easy.
to run.
Okay.
It's
So I got one more question?
that time, if you're willing to take.
Yeah, I got it. We got time. We'll stretch it a little. We'll be there. Never been on time for anything. Why start now? Any other questions? All right then. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.